Markelle Fultz. Markelle Fultz entered the league as the top pick and the final piece of Philadelphia's young core. But right away, something felt off. His jumper, the move that made him unstoppable at Washington, vanished almost overnight and left fans wondering what went wrong behind the scenes. The messaging from the Sixers kept shifting, first blaming mechanics, then a shoulder issue, then a nerve disorder, and the confusion only got louder as his shooting form grew stranger by the week. Fultz bounced between starts and bench roles without any real clarity. Coaching changes disrupted his development, and every national broadcast turned his struggles into a spectacle. The team never aligned on a plan, and his confidence eroded in real time, while the franchise publicly insisted everything was fine. Orlando finally gave him stability, but the damage from the early chaos lingered, showing how fragile a young star's path can become when a front office cannot stick to its own script. And what happens next makes this story even tougher. Brandon Roy looked like he was built for superstardom, a smooth scorer with elite footwork, and a game that felt years ahead of its time. Portland relied on him for everything. But the heavier his workload became, the more his knees pushed back. His degenerative condition was known early, yet the team kept leaning on him through major minutes and high-pressure moments that demanded constant explosiveness. Surgeries followed, and his body struggled to keep pace with the demands placed on it. Roy delivered heroic playoff performances, including his unforgettable comeback against Dallas, but each return came with a cost his knees could no longer pay. By the time the Blazers eased up, it was too late, and their medical gamble had burned through the short window he had left. Roy retired at just 27, leaving behind a legacy defined by brilliance and fragility. And the next story digs even deeper into how a player's rise can crumble without warning. Jeremy Lin sparked one of the wildest stretches in modern NBA history, turning the Knicks into must-watch television as Madison Square Garden erupted every night during Linsanity. His pick-and-roll chemistry with Mike D'Antoni's offense unlocked a version of Lin nobody expected, and the sudden global spotlight put real pressure on the franchise to build around him. But once D'Antoni stepped down, everything flipped. His minutes dipped, the ball left his hands, and his momentum vanished as quickly as it came. Carmelo Anthony and Raymond Felton took over initiating the offense, and Lin was pushed into the background with no real path back to the role he once owned. He never complained publicly, but insiders knew the system shift made his breakout nearly impossible to replicate. The rise was electric, but the fall started quietly, and the next case is even more staggering. Grant Hill entered the league as a future face of basketball, a do-everything wing who attacked the rim, controlled tempo, and impacted games on both ends. Detroit leaned heavily on him, and when he injured his ankle late in his final season there, he pushed through pain to help the team make the playoffs. That decision became the turning point. The injury worsened, and when Hill transitioned to Orlando, the full extent of the damage surfaced, leading to multiple surgeries and a terrifying infection that nearly cost him more than basketball. The Magic invested in a superstar they rarely got to see. When he finally regained stability, he reinvented himself as a veteran glue guy in Phoenix. But the prime that once pointed toward MVP seasons had already been sliced away. His path shows how a single medical decision can reshape an entire career. And the next chapter hits even harder. Derrick Rose exploded into the league with a style built on speed, power, and relentless attacks at the rim, instantly becoming one of the most electrifying guards the NBA had ever seen. Chicago rode him heavily, giving him enormous usage and intense minutes that stacked pressure on every drive and every landing. When he tore his ACL during the 2012 playoffs, the fallout became even more controversial, as debate swirled about whether he had been overused leading into the postseason. Rose tried returning to form, but each comeback seemed to meet another setback, as meniscus tears and lingering soreness kept resetting his progress. The league had never seen a player burn this hot and fade this fast, and fans kept wondering how different things might have looked with more cautious management early on. Even when he found new roles later in his career, he carried the weight of unrealized potential. And it gets worse, because the next case shows what happens when chaos comes from inside the building. DeMarcus Cousins was a dominant force in Sacramento, a walking 25-12 who demanded double teams and punished anyone brave enough to challenge him in the post. But the Kings changed coaches constantly, shifting systems and philosophies so often that Cousins never had a stable environment to develop inside. Then came the infamous feud with Paul Westphal, which escalated into public statements, suspensions, and damage to Cousins' reputation that lingered long after. When he finally landed in New Orleans and played his best basketball alongside Anthony Davis, the Achilles tear erased everything and set off a chain of devastating injuries. Golden State brought him in, but the rushed timeline after the quad injury exposed how fragile his recovery was, and another setback derailed the chance to rebuild his value. Cousins kept fighting, but franchises kept moving on quickly, leaving him stuck between injuries and instability. The fall was steep, and the next story delivers an even wilder twist. Gilbert Arenas. Gilbert Arenas went from second-round surprise to one of the league's deadliest scorers, dropping threes from impossible angles and carrying Washington to its most exciting era in years. But his rise collided with major knee injuries that were followed by a controversial rehab process insiders still question today. Then came the infamous locker room incident that spiraled into a massive suspension and destroyed trust between Arenas and the Wizards' front office. What made it worse was how publicly everything unfolded, turning him into a headline magnet, just as he struggled to regain his physical abilities. Orlando took a chance on him, but his explosiveness had evaporated, and whispers about his work habits mixed with the fallout from the incident only deepened the damage. His decline happened in plain sight, fast and unforgiving, and the element of scandal made the story even harder to repair. And what comes next involves a different kind of sabotage, one built on pressure instead of controversy. Lamar Odom. Lamar Odom thrived as the Lakers' versatile engine, a matchup nightmare who handled the ball like a guard and anchored lineups with his creativity. After winning Sixth Man of the Year in 2011, he expected to remain a core part of the team, but the failed trade for Chris Paul blindsided him and destroyed the trust he had in the franchise. He learned about the trade discussions from the media instead of the front office, and the shock shook his confidence so deeply that he struggled to regain rhythm. The Lakers moved him to Dallas soon after. Fans saw a player who looked disconnected, but insiders pointed to how the mishandling of the trade impacted him long before the games reflected it. Odom never returned to the form he owned in Los Angeles, and that shift marked the start of a downward turn that felt entirely avoidable. But first, only cool people are subscribed to this channel, so hit that subscribe button before we go any further. Mitchell Robinson entered the league as one of the most efficient young centers ever. A shot-blocking menace who broke field goal percentage records before most players learned NBA defensive rotations. But his development took a strange turn when coaching changes and shifting priorities pushed him into inconsistent roles. Despite anchoring the defense and dominating the glass, he frequently lost minutes to veteran Taj Gibson, a move many fans saw as more about coaching comfort than performance. Robinson worked to expand his game, but the Knicks rarely gave him offensive touches or opportunities to test new skills. Injuries added another hurdle. Yet even when healthy, he found himself glued to the bench during key stretches, despite advanced metrics showing his positive impact. His potential never aligned with his usage, and the feeling grew that his growth was being capped by decisions above him. Robinson's story feels unfinished, but what comes next reveals an even deeper clash between player and coach. Ray Allen. Ray Allen carved out a Hall of Fame career as one of the greatest shooters in basketball history, and he still played at a high level deep into his Boston years. But things grew tense when Doc Rivers and the Celtics decided to replace him in the starting lineup with Avery Bradley, a move made without fully communicating its long-term plan. Allen accepted the change publicly, but behind the scenes, he felt the trust eroding as Rajon Rondo's growing influence shifted the locker room dynamic. When the Celtics lowballed him with an offer that included fewer minutes and less offensive responsibility, Allen questioned where he truly fit in their future. Miami offered a fresh start, and his decision to leave Boston sparked a wave of anger from fans who never knew the full story of how alienated he felt. His departure changed the arc of the Big Three era forever, and the next example shows how star players can be pushed out long before their value actually fades. Nate Robinson brought energy every time he touched the floor, a fearless guard who played far bigger than his height and hit clutch shots with no hesitation. During his time with the Knicks, he experienced one of the strangest coaching decisions of the era when Mike D'Antoni benched him for 14 straight games with almost no explanation. Reporters kept pressing for clarity, but D'Antoni offered vague comments about fit and focus, leaving fans confused and teammates stunned. Robinson returned to the lineup and immediately scored 41 points, showing just how damaging the benching had been to his rhythm and reputation. The extended absence hurt his contract value and created the narrative that he was too unpredictable despite consistently producing when given minutes. New York eventually traded him, and he spent the rest of his career bouncing between teams that viewed him as a spark rather than a core piece. His fall felt unnecessary, and the next story follows another player pushed aside in a system that never suited him. Zach Randolph. Zach Randolph entered his prime as a reliable 20 and 10 machine, a bruising post scorer who overwhelmed defenders with strength and touch. But during his stint with the Knicks, he found himself stuck in a system that actively minimized his skill set. Mike D'Antoni's fast-paced offense prioritized spacing and speed, leaving little room for Randolph to operate on the block. Instead of building around his production, the Knicks treated him as an awkward fit and shipped him out for cap flexibility, framing the move as a step toward a new era. Randolph didn't decline. He simply got pushed aside for stylistic reasons that ignored his value. Once he landed in Memphis, he immediately reminded everyone how dominant he could be, becoming the heart of the grit and grind movement and leading the Grizzlies to deep playoff runs. His rise after leaving New York exposed just how misjudged he had been, and the next player's story shows what happens when internal politics take over. Dennis Smith Jr. Dennis Smith Jr. came into Dallas as a high-flying guard with a rare burst, and his rookie year showed flashes of a franchise cornerstone. But the arrival of Luka Doncic shifted everything, and tension grew as Rick Carlisle reportedly questioned Smith's motives and suggested he was jealous of Luka's success. The comments fractured trust between player and coach, and Smith's role shrank even as he tried to adjust to a new offensive system. Instead of developing alongside Luka, he found himself pushed to the margins of the rotation, with trade rumors swirling despite his young age and clear potential. When the Mavericks sent him to New York in the Kristaps Porzingis deal, he arrived with pressure and baggage that was never his fault. His confidence dipped, his minutes plummeted, and the expectations that once fueled his rise now added weight he couldn't shake. Smith's career pivoted fast, and the next story dives into one of the biggest injury what-ifs ever seen. Greg Oden. Greg Oden was drafted to be the foundation of Portland's future, a dominant defensive center with rare mobility and touch for his size. But from the moment he arrived, injuries kept stacking up in ways the organization struggled to manage. Concerns about his mechanics and alignment surfaced early, and comparisons to the franchise's history with Sam Bowie created pressure that no young player should carry. Each comeback attempt revealed new issues. Oden showed flashes of brilliance, but his body could not withstand the demands placed on it. When more surgeries followed, the momentum of his career slipped away, and he became one of the league's most heartbreaking what-if stories. His decline wasn't about effort. It was about a cycle of setbacks that felt bigger than him. And the final case reveals how even a superstar can break down under relentless strain. Yao Ming. Yao Ming carried global expectations and became an immediate star, balancing NBA dominance with an enormous national profile that demanded constant travel and year-round play. Houston relied heavily on him, often playing him deep into games despite concerns about the long-term durability of a 7'6" frame. Stress fractures began surfacing, and critics argued he was logging too many minutes without enough recovery time. Even so, he kept pushing through injuries to support the team and his national commitments. Each return brought renewed hope, but the workload kept adding pressure to his feet and ankles until the fractures became too severe to overcome. By the time the Rockets adjusted his minutes, permanent damage had already taken hold. Yao retired earlier than anyone expected, leaving behind a career defined by brilliance and sacrifice, shaped heavily by the burdens placed on him. If you liked this video, consider watching this next one, which YouTube thinks you're going to really love.